Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wine.com Experiences. I'm Gwendolyn Osborne. Today, we are talking about the pioneers of California in honor of California Wine Month. These are the people and families who really made California wine what it is today. We've got some incredible guests and some delicious wines to taste. If you did purchase those wines through Wine.com ahead of time, great. Go ahead, get those open, get them into some glassware. We are tasting all three wines. If you don't have the wines yet, that's okay. We still have that set available on Wine.com. And you can always revisit this video on our YouTube channel, Wine.com YouTube channel. If you're looking for more detailed tasting notes on the wines, we're going to get into them as we taste, but you can always also check out those pages on Wine.com to learn a little bit more. This is all about California. It's California Wine Month, and we are talking to the families and people who really helped build this place, this industry, the wine industry in California, into what it is today. And California is now a huge wine producing place, well respected all through the world. It's so diverse as well. So you have this one state, but you have everything from these cool coastal valleys to these, high elevation desert vineyards, and then you've got the kind of inland valleys and mountain viticulture. So you've got diversity all through our regions, as well as the different grape varieties that are grown that result in these really diverse styles. So California kind of has something for everyone. It's also always led the way in innovation and just kind of just different practices in the vineyard, in the wineries, just always kind of looking at the new technology, but also kind of also embracing what's real and leading the way in sustainability. So California's wonderful place, wonderful wines. And so we hope you enjoy talking to those who really made it happen. So the three wines that we are tasting in order are the Wente Morning Fog Chardonnay, the Gundlach Bundschu Mountain Cuvée, and Buena Vista Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. And so now I would love to introduce you to our guests. From Buena Vista, we have winemaker Brian Maloney and the Count of Buena Vista, as well as John Charles Boisset. Welcome to you, Count and Brian.
Thank you, Gwendolyn.
Hello.
And of course, JC, always a pleasure. And then we also, from Gundlach Bundschu, have Katie and Jim joining us, and Jeff Bundschu as well. So we're different. Hello to all of you. And representing the Wentes, we have Phil and Nikki Wente. So I think for Jim and Katie, we've got Jim is 5th generation, Katie and Jeff, you're 6th generation, and then Nikki, you're 5th generation, and Phil's 4th generation. So lots of generations. I mean, John Charles, I think you're in a generation, kind of all of your own probably, but you are a generational winemaker as well. So, and Brian, I know you came from viticulture too. So anyway, I'm so excited to have all of you here. Lots of history and stories to share. Speaking of which, I want everybody to know, obviously these are really wonderful stories with a lot of history to get through. So if you are of a thirsty nature, I encourage you to go ahead and start tasting the wine. We will get to the wine eventually.
I did it.
But feel free to sip along as don't feel required to wait. We'll all be sipping along as we share these stories before we get into it. So just don't hold back. So we want to get involved and talk about this history, because you are just kind of the founding wineries and families this incredible state. So we're starting with Buena Vista and the Count of Buena Vista. Count, thank you for being here and joining us.
It is my great pleasure to be here on this modern device.
So you founded Buena Vista back in 1856, and you'd come here from Hungary, but then lived in Wisconsin and then Southern California. What was it about Sonoma that drew you there?
Well, thank you. I founded Buena Vista in 1857, so it was very close to 1856.
Okay. You got here in 56?
I made wine in my native Hungary, and my family had been involved in the wine trade for many generations. And throughout all my journeys through America, there was one single desire, and that desire was to find the perfect wine valley. And as you said, I went to Wisconsin in 1842, came with the gold rush to the west, settled in San Diego, too cold for the grapevines. When I found the Sonoma Valley, I realized I'd found the perfect wine valley upon our earth.
And what were the first grapes you attempted to plant here?
When I acquired Buena Vista in 1857, there were already 25 acres of grapes already on the property. And these were the mission grape, which we now know as a Listan Prieto, but this is the coarse brown skin grape planted by the mission fathers and made wine. And there were already 20-year-old vines on that property. And so I used the mission grape, but I knew that I needed more vinifera, and I acquired some through a variety of means. But in 1861, I went to Europe to bring back cuttings, and I brought back 100,000 of them, about this big, of 353 varieties, as my goal was to not just to make great wine, but to build an industry.
And so you did. That must have been a lot of suitcases with that many cuttings. That's incredible. And so building this industry, first you did have to build a winery, and Bonavista is the oldest bonded winery, correct? Is that the right term?
We're the oldest winery making wine today.
So tell us about that. Tell us about building the winery and finding the place and building that to what it is.
Well, so I acquired in 1857 the land that is now Buena Vista. I hired 150 Chinese workmen to do all of the work. They dug the first wine caves in California, the first stone winery buildings in front of them. Every year for 8 years, they planted 40,000 grapevines. I brought in the most modern of equipment from Europe. And so by 1866, Buena Vista, making 200,000 bottles of wine a year with 500 acres of grapevines. And Buena Vista, the most technologically advanced and commercially successful winery in all of America by 1866.
And well done. And John Charles, you acquired this, and thank you, Count. Wonderful story. And John Charles, you acquired this back in 2011, but you were familiar with the property before that. When did you first discover the place and its potential? And John Charles, first, thank you for being here. How are you?
Well, it's a great honor. Thank you so much. And to be with the Gundlach Bundschu family and the Wente is a great honor as well. They are the greatest families of the world of wine, not just California. So we're really delighted. So I had the pleasure, Gwendolyn, to come when I was 10 and a half on a trip with my grandparents, school teachers, who wanted to show us, my sister and I, the beautiful region of California and the missions. We started in Monterey, finished in Sonoma. And my grandmother saw on Sonoma Square, after observing, of course, the Bird Flag Republic, sculptures and monuments. And I want to say today, happy anniversary, California, because September 9, 1850 is when California joined the Union. And this is today. So everyone, happy anniversary.
Cheers. Happy anniversary.
I'll take that.
And we saw the sign, oldest winery in California. Gwendolyn, I was born making wine in Vougeot, in the Grand Cru region of Burgundy, in the Côte de Nuit. And I was already making wine in the living room, very similar to all the families here. And I felt the wall of the winery. I felt the energy of it. And Gwendolyn, my life changed because not only I loved America after that 10-day trip, I adored the energy of American people and Californian sense of pioneering and that great sense of innovation. And I said, I want to come back here one day. So we looked at each other with my sister, Natalie, and that evening we tried the 3 Chardonnays made at Buena Vista. And we made a promise to each other that we will be back making wine one day in California. And I must say, similar to the Count, I feel I'm the shareholder of his vision, because my dream forever was to bring Buena Vista in our collection of wineries. So it took me 25 years, and more. And finally, in 2011, we were able to bring Buena Vista, part of our wonderful collection of historical wineries, and continue this fabulous dream, build the museum that you see now, and really create with our friends, the Wente family, with our friends, the Bundschu family, to really continue this amazing energy of thinking of the past, Gwendolyn, and really being a student of history and honoring the heritage of what has happened in the last 170 years plus in this amazing state of California. So for me, Gwendolyn, as a one word, it's a coup de foudre, it's a love at first sight, and it's a love story with California, with America, and Buena Vista.
And we are grateful to the energy and pride you have put into recreating or reviving such a beautiful place and such beautiful wines. And we'll talk a little bit about the wines when we get to tasting. But thank you so much for both
My pleasure.
energy and passion for this place. So John Charles, the Frenchman who's also the mayor of California, I guess, just something like that. So let's move on to.
We had an Austrian governor, so who knows? Maybe there's a Frenchman disguised behind him.
John Charles, do you have something to announce?
I'm like, woo! Yeah.
Yes, my friendship with you forever. That's all I want to announce. I have too much background and too much in the closet or in the cellar. It's impossible.
That's it.
Keep it all in the cellar. So moving on to Gundlach Bundschu, also affectionately known as Gun Bun. Jim, as I mentioned, you're fifth generation vintner here in Sonoma, and your family's been through many ups and downs since first planting vineyards back in 1959 to even recently with wildfires. But tell us a little bit about the founding of the winery when Jacob Gundlach first planted Rhine Farm.
Oh, well, you're asking me to dust off some very old mental cobwebs.
Yeah, that's okay. I know you can do it.
When Jacob first planted the vineyard was 1858. So we were just a year behind Buena Vista.
I'm off on all these years. Okay.
It was a baton. We were handed off the baton. And we started, I'm sorry to hesitate here. We started with Charles Bundschu as his partner, and we went through, go ahead, take over.
Well, and Jacob Gundlach, who purchased the property and established it in 1858, he had a daughter, and his daughter actually ended up marrying his business partner, Charles Bundschu. And so that's where Gundlach Bundschu comes in. And it also happened to be Charles Bundschu was this very savvy businessman, and he built the winery up to producing upwards of 1 million gallons of wine just before the earthquake started or hit in 1906. And so that was one kind of resiliency the family had to maneuver through, was the 1906 earthquake. And then just as they were restarting, reinvigorating the winery again and making wine again, Prohibition set in. And so between the earthquake and the Prohibition, those were two of the main kind of huge events that we've had to endure through the multiple generations.
Yeah, the challenges.
Yeah.
And then of course Dad remembers, you asked him to go way far back in his bank.
Well, I know also.
You ask him anything from 1960 on, he's pretty good.
I'm hot on that.
Well, that's what did happen, is that you had, I mean, I know that there was the earthquake and then Prohibition, so finally it's just kind of like, let's just grow some pears or something, right? If you kind of keep getting punched down. But Jim, I know you were convinced and kind of the force behind reinvesting in growing wine grapes back in 1969.
Right.
So what convinced you, and how did you convince everyone else?
Well, it was about 1968, and I owe that to four fairly important people in the wine industry. Number one, not in priority, but number one was Robert Mundavi, who at that time in about 1964, 5 years before I first planted the new grapevine on our Rhine Farm estate, was hustling and bustling around Napa Valley and creating a whirlwind of interest in California wines. He was such a magnanimous purveyor of California wines that it was pretty obvious that he was doing a good job and California wines were catching on. Whereas before that, it was very difficult to even sell wine in the United States because not many people knew about it nor understood it. The second individual was August Sebastiani, kind of on a parallel track here in Sonoma Valley. And he had started putting varietal wines in half-gallon containers and needed growers to plant grapes. And before, again, this is all coming from basically nothing. So the dust had settled from Prohibition. So to have Robert Mundavi in Napa and August Sebastiani in Sonoma were the kind of the advanced guard of the modern back in 1968 California wine industry. And then coincidentally, my father, who grew grapes, became and sold them to Louis Martini from our family vineyards because our winery was still closed. Bought my father told Bundschu's grapes, and they became very good social friends. And I can remember sitting in the living room overlooking our vineyard, and Louis Martini telling my father, and I was sitting in the living room and was probably 24 years old, saying, you know, Toll, the wine business is really coming back. My dad was pretty stubborn. He'd already had a difficult time in the 40s and 50s in the vineyard industry. And Louis Martini said, Toll, and this is over after a couple of glasses of Barbera, Toll, I think it's time, you know, you should rejuvenate the Rhine Farm vineyards here in Gundlach Bundschu Winery. I mean, the timing is perfect. Your pears are underwater. So why don't you replant that? And my dad, being somewhat playing life close to the vest, just kind of went harump and walked off. And so that meeting was over. But the accumulation of Mundavi, Sebastiani, and Louis Martini then got me to talking to my dad. We went about a week later after his visit with Louis Martini. We had breakfast together and we formed a partnership. And my father, who of course owned all of Rhine Farm and the winery, which was defunct, it had the original bonded winery number 64, which we still have today. We're bonded winery number 64. It was on a building, 4 rock walls, which is today where Bundschu is. And we formed a partnership. And he allowed me to begin. I told him, I convinced him that I wanted to be a farmer and grow grapes. So he said, go ahead. And it was a handshake. I proceeded to purchase some grapevine, this is kind of fun to be with the Wentes, because my first purchase of grapevines from a nursery was from the Wentes, and I purchased Gewürztraminer and Chardonnay from their nursery down in their vineyard. So little did we know that we go way back. I would never imagine that we'd be on a Zoom program together. But we owe our Chardonnay and Gewürztraminer to the Wentes. So what a small world. And life has never slowed down since then.
It is. And I love just the generational story of having the family continue and keep going, which is wonderful. And I know, Jeff, you growing up around the vineyards and where you are now, what are some of the changes and innovations you've seen, Jeff?
Well, I mean, it was obviously a good history. And I'll just start by saying thanks, Gwendolyn. And we're honored to be on this call with you guys. Zoom any which way with John Charles and the Wente family. It's just it's a treat. And I think that I second what John Charles said. I think we all feel pretty lucky to be here in California. And that's why we're still here fighting after all these years, because it's as fun as it is. But what I saw was, a lot of hard work that Dad put into it. And then lucky enough for me, as a guy that wanted to drink wine in his late teenage years, I caught on to the fact that Gundlach Bundschu became the sole American winery distributed by Seagram Chateau and Estates, which may not mean much to anybody out there, but what it meant for me was that once a year, these French executives would arrive in Sonoma and ply us with what are now like classified growth Bordeauxs. And very early on, we saw and recognized a shared capacity for high acid, sort of bright, fresh old world, I guess we'd call it now, Cabernet Merlot, kind of the Bordeaux stuff that we do down here in a very unusual place to do it. And that kind of set us off on a path, really that we've been on ever since, which is we've got this unique site. You know, you don't think of Southern Sonoma as like a Cabernet Mecca, but we stand right next to the idea that the maritime influence from the Pacific Ocean combined with the slopes of the Mayacamas Mountains that we're on the base of create this unique environment that isn't as warm as Up Valley in some places, but ends up with long ripening time and a whole lot of yumminess, as Katie, you know, can't stop drinking it herself, but we can't either. It's that good.
Drink water, not wine.
You know, so I sort of had this, you know, beautiful inheritance, if you will, of an incredible piece of property, an incredible spirit with which to present it to the world, which is defined by accessibility, approachability, and just warmth. A lot of it that you're seeing on this call, but then combined with an ambition to also make incredibly great wine that could stand with the best in the world. And I thought I was going to get done with that in, you know, 5 or 10 years and then go surfing for the rest of my life. And I still haven't figured it out, but I'm having fun anyway doing it.
That's fantastic. I'm sure you can kind of maybe split up your year a little bit and hit the wave for one part, right? And Katie, what about you? Kind of seeing what's happened in the winery over the past couple decades.
You know what? My job is just to take what my dad and my brother have done and deliver that out into the world, into the message, or deliver that out into the world. And I mean, I'm just proud to be here. Without my dad or what my brother have done, I get the fortune of being a few years younger than my brother. So he's done a lot of the hard work, and now I get to come in and kind of take what he's done and make sure that people have wine in their glasses to drink beyond just here on Rhine Farm. And so luckily, thanks to you guys, Wine.com, we have the ability to share those wines.
I bet I'm the only family member here that's been accused of being his father's brother and his sister's father during a period of my life. That's not very good where I'm coming
from. True story.
Actually, that means you've got a versatile age range here. I would just
for everybody else, except for one of us.
I like that. Well, I'm a huge fan of your wines too, so appreciate all that you're putting into it. So we're going to move on to Wente. I think, you know, I've already recommended everybody to start sipping, but we're going to be talking about Wente and the history of Wente, and we're going to be sipping on that Morning Fog Chardonnay.
We're going to get a refresher here.
Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the Wente story. Appreciate it. So we're going back, and both my other years, I was like a year off. So I was grabbing, I guess, the wrong year when I'm reading about the history, but is 1883 the right one?
You got it.
1883 it was.
All right. All right. Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
What was it? You know, 1883, you've got, you know, people, I mean, obviously wine wasn't a huge draw or creating vineyards, but what was it about Livermore? Because we've been talking about Sonoma. What was it about Livermore you think that drew the Wente family there?
Well, when you look at the history of the California wine industry in the early 1880s, 68% of the wine grape acreage was in Alameda, Napa, Sonoma, and Santa Clara counties. So right around the bay was the wine industry, and Livermore Valley was an equal participant of the Alameda, Napa, Sonoma, Santa Clara sort of synergies that were going on. And our great grandfather had an opportunity to come and be an investor in a small vineyard, 50-acre property, and liked what he saw, liked the soil, liked the climate, settled down, had an opportunity to get started. And it was really bootstraps. So, you know, starting very small, working for others, doing custom services, learning how to make wine, selling wine to wine brokers. It took a long time as he gradually worked his way up into the wine industry. In fact, he sold quite a bit of wine to Gundlach Bundschu as one of his primary customers, all the way up until Prohibition. So again, we're sort of all related, and I'm sure we sold to Buena Vista as well, Jean-Charles. So
we'll have to go look for that record.
Yeah. There's a great picture of my father, myself sitting on my grandfather's knee, and my brother Eric on my dad's knee.
And
that's a great picture. really have enjoyed. So, this Chardonnay just sort of tells the story of our great grandfather growing up and deciding that he needed to diversify, get a little bit of Chardonnay plantings that he started in 1908 and continued selecting it all the way through Prohibition. And when repeal came and they decided to go with varietal labeling, it really created the demand for planting the prime varietals again that had mostly been lost during Prohibition. So at that point, the Wente Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, as varietal wines really began to take off. So that was sort of the stimulus behind growing and selecting the Chardonnay.
Right. Yeah. So we never pulled out the Chardonnay during Prohibition. We just actually continued to increase our block. My great grandfather, his grandfather, Ernest Wente, had a selection method where he went through the vineyard and would look at the vines, taste the berries during ripening, and mark the vines that looked healthy, that had a lot of growth, had beautiful set clusters, and tasted amazing. He was looking for a few different flavor profiles. There was the apple, there's like that muscat flavor, there's those tropical papaya, almost to banana flavors that you can get from Chardonnay. And he would mark all the different vines and continue to replant based on those vines. So literally just cutting off some shoots during dormancy and then sticking those shoots in the ground and building out the block. So we were very fortunate that he passed that on to the family. So that's kind of like a family tradition now. My father taught me, I've taught my sister, or both of my sisters. And so it's kind of a family tradition. We'll go out into our heritage blocks that the parent wood has never left our property since 1908. And we continue to do it today. So I'm very blessed to have Ernest and his foresight in thinking through, let's get the best Chardonnay, the best flavor profiles. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. Let's focus on what we're doing here. And then we were able to be friends with our neighbors and hand out some wood. And that's where that Wente clone name comes from. It's really fun.
That's what I want. I kind of want to rewind a little bit because I feel like you kind of skipped over that. And that's a pretty big decision that kind of forged a path for Wente, was when Ernest went and imported these Chardonnay cuttings from France that now becomes this famous Wente clone. And what is it, like 65, 80%? I forget, 65% of all Chardonnay in California is from this one clone that your great grandfather brought back. So tell us about the journey.
Let's back up a couple of steps just to be technically corrected.
Okay.
It's sort of Wente selections. The term clone would be a single vine source. And over the years, lots of people we've allowed to come to our vineyard and take multiple vines. Yeah. He also had two initial selections. One was from the Theodore Gear Vineyard in Pleasanton that was actually a Charles Wetmore importation in the early 1880s. That ended up being planted at UC Davis in what they call Block D. And the second importation was with a professor, Leon Bonnet, at UC Davis from the F. Richter Nursery in Montpellier. And so they had both those sources in the vineyard, and then his selection process, as Nikki described it, started. And so it has really been sort of a 50-year evolution. But also, how cool is it to be sitting here with our daughters, our sons, and the demonstration of family? I couldn't be prouder.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing to have. And Nikki, I mean, how does it feel? I mean, when you kind of grow up, you're like, oh, this is what I get to do, and you don't have to like decide on a career. But have you always been kind of passionate about, grabbing it, just diving in and taking on that kind of role?
So our family has been really great at, you do whatever you want to do. And that's kind of been the motto of every one of my family members. Like my middle sister wanted to be a broadcast journalist. So she went to school for broadcast journalism. And my eldest sister wanted to be a architect. So she went to school for architecture and then changed to political science because she was going to go into politics. And so our parents were just super encouraging. And they're like, whatever you want to do, you go get it. And I was just the one child that I followed him around like a fly, and probably just as annoying too. But I loved what he did. I loved that he worked in the vineyards. I loved being outdoors. I loved seeing something grow from what looked to be dead, dormancy to full life. I mean, it was just so curious to me. And I drove that curiosity all the way to college. And I'm very, very happy with the career choice today. I don't think there's a more perfect fit for me. So I was the one child that grew up knowing exactly what she wanted to do from probably 11 years old.
I'm gonna have a big drink of that.
He's probably still kicking himself for showing me because he gets a lot of phone calls. Like, why did you plant this here?
Yeah. No, I think it's great. The family, I mean, everybody here, I think, comes from a rich line of families, passionate about the vines. So
yeah,
now you're a landmark in Livermore, an iconic Chardonnay producer, which is amazing. So I want to kind of maybe taste through the Chardonnay and talk a little bit about it, and maybe how it. So I would call it a Wente selection rather than the Wente clone. That's the proper term. I want to be right.
Perfect. No, you're right. You're totally right. Yeah.
Okay.
So this comes from a small percentage of this wine is from the Wente selection.
Okay.
And then most of it is from descendants of that. So a lot of clone 4, a lot of clone 5. There's a little bit of your traditional Dijon clones in there as well, just a small percentage. But most of it is from descendants of that Wente heritage stock that we brought in 1908 and 1912. So super fun to be able to drink this and kind of just think about all the history. But I also think that this wine does a really good job at just showing you Livermore Valley. You know, it's called morning fog because here in Livermore, we get morning fog. We don't get afternoon fog. We don't usually get evening fog, but you get that morning fog. It rolls in from the San Francisco coast. And if you don't know where Livermore is, we are just east of San Francisco. As the crow flies, we're 12 miles from the Hayward Bay. So we could touch water 12 miles away. And then from the center of San Francisco, it's about 40 miles. So pretty close to San Francisco there. We get a lot of coastal influence from that. And we get that beautiful morning fog layer that just rolls through from San Francisco, keeps the canopies nice and cool. Also comes in from that nice coastal breeze that cools us off because it gets kind of warm during the summer months. Most days between 75 and 90. So kind of a big spread, which is also close to San Francisco. You get those coastal breezes, you can't control them. But that morning fog really is what does something special for this particular wine. You retain all that acidity from that nice diurnal shift, and then you get that nice, almost like a minerality, beautiful texture to it, and those nice green apple flavors. And I think that morning fog is really what does the trick. So Livermore Valley is just a perfect place to have some Chardonnays on your flat ground, maybe a little bit denser soil. And then when you have those nice sloping hills, you get the Cabernet up there to get a good sun exposure, and boom, grow Cabernet and Chardonnay in the same area.
Just a little bit of finagling, right? And then the vineyard there, but talk us through this a little bit and the aromas and the flavors and kind of how because this is a wonderfully, I mean, there's some vintage changes, but I mean, it's a wonderfully consistent and extremely delightfully affordable, which I love, wine we drink this on our own.
In this particular style, we are really trying to achieve sort of a 50% barrel fermented, 50% stainless steel fermented. Barrel fermented portion does go through malolactic, so we're developing a little bit of that flavor profile, bringing in the vanilla, a little bit of toasty oak, not overstated, and then the stainless steel portion does not go through malolactic, so it brings back that really crisp acidity when it's blended together. And I think overall we really strive for sort of a texture or a beautiful soft weight that feels luscious in the mouth.
Yeah.
And I do agree. It's the consistency. Our winemaking team does an excellent job, and my cousin Carl, who leads our winemaking team, with that consistency of getting a wine that it might evolve a little bit over time, but you know, you want your consumers that know and love this wine, especially because it's a friendly price range. You know, I drink this wine for dinner most nights, and with one of those wines, you kind of want to know what you're opening up in the bottle. Excuse me. And so it's nice to just have one of those tried and true trusted wines. And I believe that all of the wines that we're having tonight are those beautiful, beautiful wines that we can always open up and know what we're going to love before we even open it. But it's just one of those fun things that.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. And it has that yin and yang that I always want in a great white, but especially Chardonnay, of that richness of texture, but that kind of zippy acidity to kind of keep it in that wonderful balance. So
yeah.
Balance. It's all about the balance.
I always say this is the welcome to Chardonnay wine. So if you don't like Chardonnay, we're going to welcome you in with this one, and then we'll move you up to something a little bit heavier.
It is. It's a welcome Chardonnay. And I like that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It's delicious. And yeah, just wonderful. So thank you. Our next wine we're going to taste is the Gundlach Bundschu Mountain Cuvée, also another wine I have on hand a lot. Katie, maybe could you tell us a little bit about this wine, the blend of it?
Sure. So it is a Bordeaux-inspired blend, 77% Merlot, 13% Cabernet Sauvignon, a little bit Petit Verdot, Malbec, and Cab Franc in this Bordeaux blend. But really what it allows us to do is bring the vision of my dad and the dedication and quality that my brother has put forth on our property to essentially to the masses. I say that kind of masses because it's not as though this wine is mass produced, but it allows us to get it out to the world beyond here, just at the winery in an affordable and approachable way. My dad touched upon it a little bit when he talked about planting Cabernet, but he also talked about Louis Martini, but we are the first Sonoma County winery to label Merlot as a varietal back in 1976. And he was very adamant about the maritime influence here on our property. So in Sonoma, we're located on the very southern tip of Sonoma County. We're about 45 minutes to the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, or we're 45 minutes to downtown Healdsburg. So pick your direction, but on that very southern tip, we're heavily influenced by the San Pablo Bay. So we get that really beautiful maritime climate. We also get morning fog. We get some afternoon fog too. But so this wine is yes, exactly. We would love, yes. So it is, so I talked about excuse me, there's a fly in our studio right now. He wants to have some Mountain Cuvée with me. But so my dad, his stamp was Merlot. My brother's stamp was quality Cabernet. And so we're bringing those two varietals together.
And yeah, it's a beautiful wine. I don't know if you want to talk us through the tasting or.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yes, essentially what we do is most of this fruit comes from our property in Rhine Farm. We also source from about a 3 to 5 mile radius around the property. When we harvest it, we harvest everything separately in separate lots. And then we cold soak the fruit from anywhere between 3 to 5 days. And then ultimately when we blend it, it sits in barrel, predominantly French oak, from anywhere between 12 to 14 months. And what we're trying to do is create a wine that's really plush but yet has structure to it, because we love, as Jeff talked about, kind of those fresh, higher acid, some more tannin structure wines. That's what we've grown up with. So that is exactly what we're trying to do with Mountain Cuvée, but yet do it in a way that is a little bit more price friendly on the side, as opposed to some of the other wines that are out there. But yes, every day we kind of call this a serious style red blend, especially for the Sonoma County. We call it, yes, a serious style red blend. And I can talk through a little bit of the fruit characteristics if you want me to, or I know my brother's never shy and always likes to jump in and has.
I'm not asking you, keep going. It sounds good.
Yeah. Just tell us. I mean, usually when people join us and have the wines in front of them, they kind of want it. It's like what if you're in a tasting room or if you're somewhere, just kind of describe what your goal is for this flavor profile.
Mm-hmm. So definitely highlighting the more dark fruits, the blue and purple fruits profile. In terms of the cassis, we get a lot of cassis that comes off of from the Cabernet, which is anything. What do you want to say about it, Dad?
We mainly concentrate on the body. We drew a line long ago about making thin wines. And the way we started making Mountain Cuvée was way back when I was running the place, Sonoma red wine. And we needed a way to get rid of our press fraction, Cabernet and Merlot. They had a lot of tannin, and we expanded and began with all our local knowledge of the local good vineyards, Bordeaux varietals. It became so popular that we went out and began to purchase grapes from our neighbors to augment what was originally just our pressed fraction wines, which is when the juice that comes out after you begin to squeeze the skins fairly diligently. That's the juice, which can be somewhat astringent if it's not blended with another quality wine. So that's the history of it.
Yeah. So now it's definitely all about that soft, plush, smooth wine from the start. From the second you smell it, the aromatics in it are really lifting. Like I said, a lot of dark fruit, purple fruit. And then once it hits your palate, you expect it to maybe taste a little bit differently, but it tastes not sweet is kind of what I like to say.
Yeah.
You can you taste it and you expect it to be a little bit sweet, but then once it's on your palate, those nice soft tannins come through, that structure, that vibrancy, and that freshness comes through, which oftentimes I think this wine definitely, sometimes people perceive it to be much more serious, especially for the price point than it does come across.
Yeah, I love, like I said, these are all some of my house wines because they are affordable, but they're also wonderfully consistent. They're so well balanced. And like you said, yeah, it's almost like these sweet fruits, but really on the palate, it just comes through as like a nice ripeness that's balanced out by all that structure, and it's beautiful.
I'll just chime in I don't have the Wente in front of me, but I can speak to it from our version of it, that these are also real wines, meaning they are, when we talk about sweet and red wine, the first time I heard those two words in the same sentence, I almost rolled over. But it is a bright part of what's going on in wines from around the world and in California in particular. But a lot of that's added. A lot of that's a sort of an afterthought. What we have going here is just the nature of the fruit that emanates from the production process, from the vineyard site, that makes itself into the glass. And what you see here is what you get. There's not a lot of doctoring that goes on. There's not a lot of goofing around in the cellar or additives or anything like that. And that's sort of the core of what the wine's about. And as Katie said, the goal was to bring something to bear that nodded toward a lot of the sort of high touch wines that we make that cost a lot more to make, that we can't sell at this price, but that can be sold and kind of enjoyed on a day-to-day basis. It's one of our house wines too. So we're with you there, Gwendolyn.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I don't want people, just because something is affordable doesn't mean that it's not any less quality than your higher end. You're putting the same passion and energy and quality behind this wine, and it's an expression of the grapes and the place. And these are all real wines from real people and real families, and that are expressing that kind of realness of California. So thank you. Good call. Good point. All right, we are going to move on to the Buena Vista Cabernet. Brian, we're going to be speaking to you. Thank you for being here. I've seen you. I've not spoken to you, so I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. Happy to finally get a chance to jump in.
Yes, you're going to jump in to tell us about this Cabernet. So we're going back to Buena Vista Cabernet. This is a Napa Cabernet from a Sonoma winery. So tell us a little bit about why we call it. I think it also says like Chateau Buena Vista, and the Cabernet is coming from Napa. So explain.
Yeah, no, of course. A lot of it goes back to the history of Buena Vista and what the Count Augustin Ferrasti was doing back when he first purchased this property in the 1850s. In fact, it was property both on the Sonoma as well as the Napa sides of the Mayacamas. And he made wines from both sides. And that stayed true as part of Buena Vista's history until only a small interlude that happened in the mid-2000s. Buena Vista had been producing wines from both Napa and Sonoma, primarily from the Carneros region in modern times. But several years back, John Charles, myself, and the team here at Buena Vista really felt inspired by all the effort that had gone into the restoration of the historic wine buildings here at the winery, and the reopening on the anniversary of the Count's birth, and a dedication speech that was given on that day, talking about how this was the White House of wine. And so from that inspiration, the celebration of our chateau, we decided to go back to Napa. And the first vintage we did was in 2012 with some grapes coming out of the center of the valley. And we found a style that we really felt spoke about the grandeur of Buena Vista by utilizing that Napa fruit. A few years later, we purchased our own estate vineyard just outside of St. Helena, and that's really become the backbone of this wine going forward. That valley floor fruit just gives you an incredible intensity and softness and richness, and I think it speaks to what Buena Vista is trying to show in all of its wines, but even more so in the Chateau Buena Vista Cabernet.
Yeah, well, cheers to that. But yeah, talk us through that a little bit, though. Just what are you? I mean, you touched on a little bit, but we're getting in the nose, the flavor profile you're going for that kind of represents Napa, but also that same passion of Bonavista.
Yeah, no, really, it's about the backbone of that valley floor fruit. So there's a lot more richness you get as you get into St. Helena. This is really the warmest part of the Napa Valley. You finally reach this point where the valley itself turns from being roughly north-south to actually bending more east-west as you get to Calistoga. And so there's a lot more warmth in these vines. There's a lot of richness. You have some clay soils down there that, give them some water retention to really last through the growing season. And what I tend to see is, these vines reaching their ripeness when you have a darker fruit profile there. So you would see in that Gunbun wine, you're also getting those darker fruits, those blue fruits, but also to me, it's starting to get into that plum aspect as well. But also to echo what they were saying about the Gunbun, when it comes down to it, it's that velvety texture, the smoothness, the richness that you're looking for, and there's nothing that delivers in that like Napa Valley Cabernet. Our estate vineyard is planted to complementary Bordeaux varieties. We have a little bit of Petit Verdot out there. We have some Cabernet Franc. And then we purchase a bit of Merlot coming from the southern part of the valley out of the Oak Knoll district. That helps, I think, really give you a little bit more acidity and a brightness to this wine that complements that rich fruit coming out of St. Helena. One of the other things we like to do is match this with some beautiful French oak barrels that we work with. Having worked with John Charles and our teammates over in Burgundy, I've had access to some great coopers over the years and been able to go visit them and, see this development of, from tree all the way to barrel, and matching that with the right wine is incredibly important. And so we utilize that in the process of aging this wine, putting it down in those French oak barrels. And then actually after racking of about 18 months in and making our final blend, we go back down to barrels and really allows us to age this wine out to a point where when you're opening this wine, it's incredibly accessible. It's not a wine that you have to worry about aging for 5-6 years after purchase. It's something that you can hopefully open for dinner tonight and enjoy with a nice steak off the grill.
Yeah, because it does have that, I do love that tannic structure. I mean, you can definitely get the tannins. They're not overpowering, they're not overwhelming, they're not too young, but it's just, beautifully integrated in there. So beautiful wine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Love this. So all these wines I think are just, they're delicious, but they also showcase, I think, why California has been so successful with the innovation and the passion and the drive that has come from the people and families that are joining us today. So since we are talking about California and California Wine Month, I did want to touch on some current events, obviously, that we've had here, which include the wildfires that have kind of consumed the area, Northern California and all of California, actually, but just over the past few years. Jeff, I was going to start with you. I know that these fires had a personal impact on your family. But also just kind of maybe looking at Sonoma as a whole, what do you kind of see the impact on this industry and Sonoma as a place with the fires?
Well, I think that, my answer to that question changes almost annually now, unfortunately, because what we saw in 2017, which did impact us directly, was something that we'd never seen. If I grew up on the ranch here, and I'm not outside because it's too smoky to show off. I would be showing it off normally, but I grew up here. But I lived in town to move away from wildfires and snakes and things. And so in 2017, when I got word that they were considering evacuating downtown Sonoma, it was a shocker then. But then fast forward a year, and they're evacuating Healdsburg 2 consecutive years, and now we're seeing this. I think that what we're sort of faced with right immediately is that the world that we sort of know as farmers is granularly changing. And we've sort of seen that. I remember talking to Dad about 20 years ago with very early climate scientist talking to a wine grape industry group who wasn't politicized at all. He was just making observations about the weather change as a climatologist would. He brought up that there was some evolution, and then my dad, as a farmer, recognized that he sensed that, wow, that rising probably happens overnight because the daytime isn't that much warmer. Fast forward to today, where there's just this sort of onslaught of reminder that that's happening. But we, and I think everybody on this call here, have the benefit of, decades of hindsight and decades of things that you go through. And the one gift that I bet that we all share that is kind of unique in the world, that, for any sort of down moment that we might have, we can look back 1, 2, 3 generations. And in our case, we don't have to guess. We can kind of find the aunt, find the great grandfather, find the person that sort of speaks to us on what they went through, and see that they made it through, and say, well, this is crazy. Haven't ever seen it like this, but there was a lot of stuff that our ancestors went through that they hadn't seen. And so, that's what I tell our team here is celebrate the fact you get to see something wowsy, but also know we're going to get through it. And that's sort of the way we approach it.
Resilience approach, which I like.
And I think it's also important to note that we've also acquired so many friends in the industry. I mean, if anyone called us because there wasn't fires in Livermore and asked if they could process grapes through our facility because they needed somewhere to put them, we would do it in a heartbeat. And as would both Buena Vista and Gundlach Bundschu. So it's just one of those things that the industry is a tight-knit family itself. We are all big families, and we are all families together. So yeah. I think that's something really important to note about California. And maybe there is a fire near your winery, but your grapes are still fine, and they were processed at a different facility, and the wines are still going to be phenomenal. And we fight together because what is it? The rising tide.
All boats rise with the tide.
Right. Someone finish the statement.
It is. That's very true. I feel like, for me, I also use it just, I'm not a winemaker, but I call it when you really know somebody's going to be your emergency contact on that emergency contact form. That's the thing, is you've got all these good emergency contacts that are really going to help you, just survive if that's needed. So, and Brian, I was going to ask you if you had any thoughts on just, I guess, future for wine country on this coming through, if there's anything that practices that you've been putting
I think there's a lot of knowledge being gained right now. I'm part of a group of winemakers right now who are learning about what's going on, whether it's climatically or whether it's from vineyards in certain parts of the county that might have been affected. And it really is bringing people together on a whole nother level, because it's a situation that, yes, 3 years ago, none of us really would have thought this would have been an area to delve into. And now it's something that we all want to see everyone work through this together. And I think it's, to echo what Jeff's saying, generations past have had to face these difficulties, and it's because they've been able to bind together and work together that we're the great industry that we are today. And it's because of these great families and great people who are part of it that I know we're going to continue and make great wines even from 2020.
Even from 2020. There are silver linings to be found everywhere. So Nikki, I want to come back to you a little bit. I'm kind of going to segue with Nikki and Phil of kind of talking a little bit. I'd love to hear a little bit, because even though you might not be directly affected by fires burning your vineyards, I know there's climate change, there's a lot of things going on, but you've also put a lot of effort into sustainability. What practices do you think you've taken on that are ones that are going to kind of help you address all that change?
Yeah. So, going back to Ernest again, because he's just a great guy. Love Ernest. Wish I got to meet him. Dang it. But he always said that the soil was your insurance policy. And if you take care of the soil will take care of you. So that's kind of been a philosophy of ours. And we've expanded that philosophy through the years to, if you take care of your people will take care of you. And if you take care of your community will take care of you. And so that's kind of our sustainable look. It's environmental, it's economic, so that we can support our employee family, and it's also community based, and making sure that we're taking care of our community and being a part of it. And So I personally am really involved in the vineyard side of the sustainability program because that's my role. I'm a farmer myself. And so we're doing a lot with water. We do a lot with composting. We do a lot with trying to keep carbon in the soil and not in the atmosphere. So trying to implement carbon farming plans everywhere we can. So lots to do with sustainability. But it really all started because we wanted to continue this business. You know, we wanted our family business to be able to be passed down to me and then to my children someday if they so choose to be a part of it. And so you might have some more sustainability.
Well, it's practical and logical. And as you look at the passion that you have for your vineyards, your land, your brand, your people, I think Nikki hit the nail right on the head. You do what you need to do to make things work for the next 30 years. When we plant a new vineyard, we expect it to be there 30, 35 years. There's not many people that will come back and tell me, give me a 2050 vision.
Yeah.
We're forced to do that every day in the wine business. Say, what's the 2050 vision? Well, the great thing is that we have all this heritage and
we're estate grown. So everything we farm that goes into these bottles is farmed by us. So we have
pick and shovel.
Yeah,
you gotta look long.
So speaking of vision, I was going to talk a little bit. That's great because I wanted to talk a little bit about next for California. Or I don't know. I'm kind of a large question, but maybe Jim and Katie, I was going to throw this to you of kind of either for your winery, the industry, or Sonoma in general. What do you see on what's in the future on the horizon that's coming up that you want to?
Gwendolyn, that is a pretty loaded question.
Well, just what's next? I want to leave off something rather than fires or everywhere. So kind of thinking about going through that, like Jeff was saying, of just we're resilient, we can do this. What just kind of on for Gundlach or for Sonoma or for California wine industry as a whole, kind of what kind of energy are you seeing for?
Yeah, what's your 50-year plan?
What's your
right? Totally. Most people tell you not to write a 50-year plan.
No.
Exactly. We all are forced to write a 50-year plan. I mean, I like to think of it as I believe that all three of us or all three of our businesses that are sitting here are going to survive what is happening, just not through the fires, but with COVID. We're all going to evolve and adapt. And whether it's what we're doing in the vineyards to be sustainable or even how we're selling our wines. I mean, never in a million years, even in January, would I thought I'd be on a Zoom call with over 300 households with Buena Vista and Wente via a computer. So I think that we're learning to adapt in new ways and trying to figure out how to get our wines in a different means to consumers than we used to have to rely on. And so I personally am really excited about finding ways to adapt and pivot and find new ways to bring these wines to customers around the country. And that's something that gets me excited every day. Do I have the answer right now? No, but at least that's something that we get to work on every day and try and brainstorm those ways, because I know there's going to be some new creative way that someone's going to come up with. And I certainly hope that one of us here sitting on this panel gets to figure that out. But
Wine.com can help. Yes,
I definitely know Wine.com is definitely one of the means for sure. But so I don't know. It's hard not to be doom and gloom, especially with what it looks like outside of our window. But I do really believe that there's multiple generations here. We've seen so much, we've been through so much that we're going to get through this. And I'm excited about kind of what it looks like on the other end and the good changes that are going to come out of what we've been through.
Good.
I'll jump in and just say that from a viticultural and the vineyard guy here, what's exciting for us is that it's changing. Like there's evolution to be had with, not only kind of behind the scene rootstock kind of soil matches, but up front with the kinds of grape vines we can grow in different places. I know for us, we already have a pretty diverse estate, but we're always, we're always kind of shiny object people. So there's a lot of interesting varietals out there that I never would have thought we'd plant because it's a little too cool here. And all of a sudden that's not quite happening the same anymore. So, but that's the
resilience and opportunity. These are good words.
Right.
I love it. So John Charles, I want to finish off with you because I feel like that is appropriate to finish off our California Wine Month call with the Frenchman. Perfect. Who has adopted California to be his own. But what about you? You always just tell us a little bit about, your kind of vision for, well, yeah, I should probably rephrase that. But tell us a little bit about, give us a positive energy, go California speech to finish this off. Come on.
Gwendolyn, I'm absolutely bullish as I sit with three phenomenal families, the Wente, the Gundlach, Bundschu, and obviously the Count of Buena Vista. I cannot be more bullish. I come from a place where we've been in existence for thousands of years and have lived the most drastic, difficult, natural, and obviously forced times. So I'm bullish for several reasons. One, the American way of life is positive, constructive, and forward. Number two, we have Wine.com, so we can ship wine all over the country to people's homes. And this is critical because I really believe sociologically, when I first came to the US, a lot of people would often have you meet you at a bar or at a restaurant or in another public place without taking you home or their home and introducing them to their kitchen and their dining and their cooking. Today, it's changing dramatically. In spite of COVID, which is a small phenomenon over the long period of life and time and the time life of the world, I think today in America, we're cooking at home, we're getting together, we're sitting around the table, we're spending time and enjoying it. And that's the beauty of it, is people are enjoying it. So I'm bullish because it's spending more time together, giving time, allowing people, friends to discuss, to converse, to exchange, to bring this bottle of wine and those great glasses of wine in the middle of the table and catalyze the discussion. So I need to tell you, and I may not be that popular to say that, but I think what we've lived has enormous positivism for the future. Slowing down, taking time to think, taking time to enjoy, opening not just one bottle of wine in a restaurant, but 5 at home or more. Tonight I'm going to have a Wente Chardonnay, I'm going to have a Gundlach Bundschu Cabernet, and I'm going to have several bottles of Buena Vista because the first 2 were not enough. And I think that's the importance of it is, I've seen America myself, fortunately, for the last, 39 years evolving to this great place where it is today. A leader in fine wine, a leader in terroirism, understanding the sense of place, the map of the future, in spite of the climate change and evolution, American people have graduated to become the best winemakers on the planet. And they're showing us the way in the world. And Brian Maloney is the prime example. We exchange a lot with our Burgundian, Rhone, South of France team, and teaches them a lot of things, which I'm so proud of. And finally, Gwendolyn, which is so important, you are in your kitchen today, which I love to see you often there and enjoy the food you so kindly prepare, this is where the American evolution has been. Julia Child was here 50 years ago. I was remembering with the Wente family and the Bundschu at the opening of the Smithsonian Museum together, celebrating the history of California and the evolution of food. Jeff, do you remember that?
I remember.
And this is exactly that place we are now. So I think that shift, Gwendolyn, is going to allow you to promote more wine in people's home, to be enjoyed from the balcony, the patio, the terrace, to the California kitchen, as we call it, to the dining room, and really spending time conversing and really building the future. So my 2 glasses are always to America, California, and what it really represents is leadership, optimism, and a fabulous willingness to always question itself, to always continue to become the best. So I don't question the fact that I'm here because I love it, and we'll go through this. We'll see behind the window, and the horizon is bright.
That is my,
You're
that's
here.
my closing too. Okay.
Yay, John Charles.
So
Awesome.
much for being here. Thank you all for joining us and talking. And I feel like we are ending on a positive, energized note. California wine, go support it, go buy it, go drink it. Everybody stay safe and well. Cheers.
Thanks to Wine.com for supporting this. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Wine.com.
Wine.com.
Thank you, Wine.com.
Thank you.
It's both a science and a form of high art. It's made from the combination of grapes, sunlight, rain, soil, and time. It's raised up in the moments that matter. It's wine. And we are Wine.com. We have the largest wine selection in the world, online sommeliers with free advice, and now our powerful new app puts the entire world of wine in your hands. Wine.com. Seriously passionate about wine. Download our free app today.